The Sunday Papers
on Off the Ball.
And you're welcome to Off the Ball here on News Talk for your Sunday afternoon. John Duggan sitting in for Joe Malloy until 7. We hope you're doing okay. And it is time now for the Sunday Paper Review. Delighted to be joined in studio by the Irish Independent rugby writer Cian Tracy and Arthur James O'Dea from OTB Sports. Cian and Arthur, how's the form?
Not so bad, John. How are you?
Thanks for having me in.
You're going to New Zealand?
I am. I'm very, very excited. Leaving on Wednesday. So, yeah, I've never been before. I don't know if either of you lads have been.
Sure, Arthur was in Lord of the Rings.
It all seems it's all very new. I've been lucky enough to travel with the job. I was in Japan for the World Cup 2019, but New Zealand has always, like, it's bucket list stuff, isn't it, to get to see Ireland take on the All Blacks in a tour. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Not looking forward to the long arduous journey ahead of me, but I suppose it's part and parcel of it, isn't it?
Serious note, Arthur, were you ever down under?
No, never, John. How long is that flight?
Which one, I suppose, is the question. The longest is going to be 16 hours on top of an 8 before that. So, I mean, I'm leaving on Wednesday, getting there on Friday, so I don't think I'll know what's going on by the time I touch down. But thankfully arriving a few days before Ireland's first game next week. And like I said, yeah, it's just bucket list stuff to get to see Ireland playing in New Zealand. Like, you hear so much about it, how rugby is a religion down there and stuff. So I certainly can't wait for it.
It is still the stardust, doesn't it? The New Zealand fixture, where it's here, Chicago, down there, never won down there.
Absolutely. I'm sure we'll get on to it in a while. Like, there's so much on the line for them going down there, and maybe, you know, because Ireland have beaten them since they've last been there, you know, the kind of, I think the optics around it have changed, and there's a little bit of pressure on the All Blacks as well, particularly after, you know, they've come into the tour on the back of back-to-back defeats in Dublin and Paris last November. There's pressure on their head coach Ian Foster, so there's a target on Ireland's back going down there. But I mean, 5 tests, Andy Farrell was describing it basically like a Lions tour, and it really is. I mean, the 2 games against the Maori All Blacks as well are going to be seriously tough. So they're in for a gruelling tour, but it's going to be fascinating.
Cavan 6 points, Sligo 1 point, and Arthur is a great Sligo man here, and they've got a penalty. They've got a penalty, Sligo, so we'll see if they can convert it. Let's go through the back pages and the supplements on your Sunday. So you can see there, leader of the tribe, a picture of Henry Shefflin on the sideline, joyous after Galway's 1 point win over Cork in the All-Ireland hurling quarter-final. And also FAI chair Roy Barrett hits back at Kenny smear stories. So leaks to the press about Stephen Kenny's future not pleasing Roy Barrett very much in the Sunday Times. And how did Rory do? Well, he's only 3 shots off the lead going into the final round of the US Open behind Will Zalatoris and Matt Fitzpatrick. That's the Sunday Times. We have the Sunday Independent Sport. And back from the brink, Clare survive almighty scare as tribesmen set up treaty clash. James O'Connor, struggle will benefit the banner. And Paul Kimmage, when money is all that matters on the Live Golf Tour. That is the Sunday Independent. We have an interesting story on the front of the Business Post, which is horse trainer group sues Glanbia alleging losses of at least 30 million. So losses of at least 30 million are being claimed by leading horse trainer Aidan O'Brien and a number of other individuals and companies arising from contaminated feed supplied in 2020, court filings show. This is written by Catherine Sands. O'Brien and Son Donica and 8 companies linked to the Coolmore stud Ballydoyle Stables operation launched legal proceedings against Glanbia Foods Ireland last month. The case centres on equine feed, which was contaminated with a banned substance given to the stable's racehorses in October 2020. Urine samples taken from the animals tested positive for an anabolic steroid, which was used to promote increased muscle mass in cattle. Gain Equine Nutrition, which is owned by Glanbia, issued a public statement in October 2020 advising customers to refrain from feeding their equine products to animals until completed an investigation. That is the Sunday Business Post today. We have the back of the Irish Daily Mail, another picture of Henry Shefflin. Tribe get back on track. Henry braced to take on the champions Limerick as Galway shake off Leinster final pain. And Cian, PGA Tour prevent a mass exodus to Live. That is the golf split, and Emma's struggled to live up to perfection, and Ireland must be wary of a backlash on the New Zealand tour. Sligo got the goal, by the way. It is Cavan 7 points, Sligo 1-2 in the Charlton Cup semi-final. We have the Sun on a Sunday. Damned United, we have effing burnt through cash, says Richard Arnold, the managing director. Pictured having pints with fans. Last year was a complete nightmare, so he's trying to get on side here, Richard Arnold. Jeepers keepers, but Kieran defiant and defeats Kieran Kingston there. Cork boss refused to be drawn on his future, writes Jason Byrne, after the Rebels were dumped out of the All-Ireland Hurling Championship by Galway. And oozes no belly flop. So Ousmane Dembele is ready to join the Chelsea revolution, but refuses to watch it from the bench. He wants to start, so he's dictating already, even if he might not even sign. We have the back of the Sunday World. Red blow. More woe for Man United as Ericsson said to say no to move to Old Trafford. We're going to have a United story every single Sunday in the back pages. You're going to have to expect until August the 6th when the season starts. And you're going to make it work, says Aldo, on Jurgen Klopp. John Aldridge has caught him. We have the Sunday Mirror Sport. Slow-mo. Cop fear Salah has begun his long kiss goodbye and will leave for free next summer. And disunited, Arnold admits last season was a nightmare and says United have burned through the cash. And we have the Sunday People, the same story, Manchester disunited. And we have Jonathan Wilson in The Observer, always worth a read. Super subs are back, and Grealish, the game breaker, can be the benchmark, so he's always worth a read in The Observer. Arthur, I suppose the hurling is something we should be talking about, given that there's not much newspaper reaction in terms of analysis to yesterday, but I suppose there's a lot of factual analysis.
Yeah, I suppose, it's tough to turn it around especially with two games back to back like that. I'm interested from your point of view straight away, because you have obviously you have a vested interest, and I think you've made that quite public. We don't need to worry about that.
Everything I say is made public, don't worry about that.
But, from my point of view, and specifically, I suppose particularly the one I watched closer was the second game, Clare and Wexford. And I kind of seen Wexford a few times this year, funnily enough, against Galway and against Dublin. I don't necessarily think that they were up to too much. And then to see the way Clare sort of struggled yesterday kind of made me think, gee, I wonder what Clare are up to. Because after Limerick, I was like, God, Clare will pass through this. And you allow in for all the other, I suppose, tiredness and everything else and fatigue. And that was their 6th game of the championship. So you're kind of like, well, fair play. That'll take a toll. But God, it was very, very sloppy yesterday. Like, from both teams now, that's not just from Clare's point of view, but from Wexford as well. I just thought it was a lot of mistakes, a lot of handling errors, a lot of problems just in retaining the ball. I don't know, I gathered, and I suppose what piques my interest there is kind of following it afterwards on social media and stuff. The kind of feel was like, it doesn't matter, got the win there, that's great. That'll kind of, a dirty win like that'll suit them all the way now, the better facing Kilkenny. I don't know.
You'll only know the narrative when you see the Kilkenny game.
Yeah,
the Kilkenny game will tell you that Clare won it the hard way against Wexford. They weren't at their best. They showed a huge amount of character, and that stood to them against Kilkenny. And if they lose against Kilkenny, well, they've gone to the well too often in the championship. That'll be my view on it. Like Christy O'Connor's writing today, Clare had 13 more shots than Wexford. Their conversion rate only 56%, as you're saying there, Arthur. But it was clinical and decisive when it needed to be. A similar story in the first game. Cork had 13 more shots at the target than Galway, but Cork's mass proclivity eventually forced their roof to cave in, and by the end Galway had nailed 62% of their shots in the wake of Cork's catastrophic 47% conversion rate. It was just about enough, just about. I think that these are amateur players. Like, we talk about the Nations League and we talk about Armenia. The heat had an impact on the Irish players in Armenia, in my view. Obviously, they played poorly as well. Clare went through all of the Munster round robin and never lost a game in normal time. It was a titanic Munster final against Limerick. I know you're a Limerick man, Cian. And to be able to rise yourself just mentally, physically, to just go again against a fresher Wexford team with momentum, I think was always going to be difficult for Clare yesterday. And then the way they pulled it out with Aaron Shanahan. Now, Lee Chin should probably got a penalty. There was a turning point there late on in the game where the rule wasn't applied correctly, perhaps, about a black card and a penalty that Wexford should have got. But I felt that Clare, the impact of their bench, Aaron Shanahan especially, was a huge thing for them. And there was unusual, there was goalkeeper mistakes. Mark Fanning, there was a mistake, and these things happen. And we had a mistake from Patrick Collins in the Cork Galway game. But Cork will be upset about the fact that they didn't convert. Wexford will be upset that they had the game in one hand on the match, but not both hands. And I think for Clare just showed a lot of resolution that they've showed in the championship already.
I think we underestimate as well how much, like you mentioned the Munster final, it was an incredible game, how much that actually takes out of players, because we see it in professional sport across the board as well. It's like, I know Clare didn't quite get over the line that day, but backing that up so short in such a short space of time, is really, really difficult. We see it in rugby all the time, and I think the mental aspect of what these players, and
like the Bulls, for example, Leinster against the Bulls, surely there's a mental aspect.
100%. There was travel, there was all sorts of that, but the Bulls had given everything to beat Leinster and they weren't able to back it up in the final. And these are professional players, and I think there's an element of that in the GAA as well, particularly when you see what, like, Clare emptied themselves in that Munster final. It was an absolutely incredible game. And you know, like you say, like I'm a Limerick man, but like I have split allegiances really. Like my home house is in Clare. Like I would have, you know, born and grew up my early years in Limerick, but spent the rest of my time before I moved to Dublin in Clare, and would have actually hurled against a couple of the current Clare team as well. So like, I mean, I'm always keeping an eye out for the results. So it's kind of a split allegiances really. But yeah, I just think, you know, we have a tendency to look at the physical exertions that players put in, but like the mental side is just incredible as well. And what Clare did in that Munster final to take Limerick all the way must have had to take a lot out of them. And I know what you were saying, Arthur. Like, it's funny, like in this kind of the sports journalism game, like narratives are key. And like, John, you hit the nail on the head. It does always depend on how they work out before they kind of, because like if you think about Leinster, you know, we're all kind of going, oh well, they've had an easy route through, like they'll be real fresh come the Champions Cup final, and then that narrative was turned on its head. So you would like to think that defeat would stand to Clare, I think, coming through, like what did you describe it as, Arthur, a dirty game. You'd like to think that it will stand to them, because it wasn't a pretty, I saw bits and pieces of it. It wasn't the prettiest game, but they ultimately got through it, and you know, it could work in their favour.
Do you see Kilkenny and Limerick as favourites?
No. I'd see Limerick as favourites. I still think Clare are probably the second best team in the country. I still think, but I don't know. Like, it's going to be very, very interesting. That Clare Kilkenny game is, like, from a neutral standpoint, is just fascinating. I really, like, I say neutral. I really hope Clare win, but because I think at the end of the day, I'd rather see Clare win the All Ireland if it's not going to be Limerick. But I don't think. Like, they're a better team. They have better players. They're better set up. They've come up through a harder way. It's definitely there for Clare, but I don't, like, it's that same sort of whatever that you talk about mentality as well and hoodoo. Like, it just with Kilkenny, like they
haven't played since 2006, Clare and Kilkenny.
Really?
Which is fascinating in the hurling championships. It's a long time, and Kilkenny were the team that really put Clare to bed. The Loughnane era, 99 semi-final. I remember 97 Clare beat Kilkenny in the semi-final, 2002 final. It was I know 2000 Kilkenny won the All-Ireland, beaten Offaly, but it was really the start of the Cody era. It was 2002. They really took Clare apart in that All-Ireland final. Remember Henry Shefflin, who was on the sideline for Galway yesterday, scoring a goal in that game. Also, obviously, it kind of pales into, you know, perspective when you read about the tragic news about the passing of Damien Casey. He leaves a huge void in the sport that he loved. John Campbell writing in the Sunday Independent today that Tyrone chairman Michael Kerr believes Casey had played a big part in sparking interest in hurling in Tyrone and set an example for others to follow. You could not have met a nicer person, and he was absolutely dedicated to his sport and his county, said Kerr. For him to have been taken at his family and from Tyrone at such a young age is a tragedy. He had given so much and undoubtedly much more to offer. The 29-year-old had been in a holiday in Spain to attend a friend's wedding, and he had an accident in a swimming pool, and he's passed away. So our condolences, as we said yesterday at Off the Ball and News Talker, to Damien's family and his friends and his teammates. It's just awful news. So that's what happened in terms of the weekend, in terms of the matches yesterday, and obviously we're talking as well about that terrible news. Let's move on to I suppose the main story across the papers is about golf, because the US Open is going on this weekend in Boston. Brookline, the country club, Rory McIlroy, Seamus Power doing well in it, and Joe Brawley, Paul Kimmage, David Walsh all writing about golf, about sports washing, about morality, about the Live Tour, Cian.
Yeah, it's all over the papers, JD. Some pretty good pieces as well, and I suppose it's good to see like differing views as well. I mean, Joe Brawley has kind of taken the direction that it doesn't really matter what anyone says or do, because ultimately money talks, and that's his bottom line. But I particularly enjoyed David Walsh's piece with Eddie Pepperell. You know, like anyone who kind of follows golf even casually will know Eddie Pepperell is a bit of a colourful character. He's not kind of afraid to speak out, and it's basically an interview with him and kind of, you know, talking about his friend Rory Cantor, who I have to say I hadn't heard. So he's a pro golfer as well, but he's gone on to the Live Tour, and I mean, apart from the headline guys who I think we're all well aware, you know, your Dustin Johnson, your Phil Mickelsons, these are the kind of the lower end of the spectrum guys that they're trying to get into boost the numbers. It'd be fair to say, JD, wouldn't it? You'd have a better kind of handle on the golf scene than I would, but
they're buying credibility, and at the moment they're the low level of credibility purchase, but as they get better players in, like the Brysons and that, then they're going to get to a higher level, and then these players be discarded.
Exactly, and they need these guys at the moment to kind of kick it off and get the numbers up to make it look better than it is. But look, there's lots of good quotes that I picked out from Eddie Pepperell in this. You know, this is, for me, this is the crux of the whole Live Tour, and I think Eddie Pepperell hits the nail on the head here when he says, supposedly this is an innovative product that will be good for the game. That makes no sense. It's totally regressive because there's not going to be any recycling within the 48 players. Inherently, it lacks competition. And that's the question I find myself keep coming back to. I mean, you know, you're told that this is going to grow the game, but I just don't see in any way how it's going to grow the game. I was away last week, so I didn't actually see any of the Live Golf stuff. I can't say I would have been sitting down to watch it anyway, but I genuinely didn't see any of it. But you compare that to the last couple of days and I've been absolutely glued to the US Open. It's just like fascinating stuff, and the differing opinions. I mean, I know Rory McIlroy isn't everyone's cup of tea, and sometimes that really kind of...
Why is he not?
I don't know. It really could, like, I suppose a lot of people are hung up on the sort of the national identity and, like, you know, the Olympics thing, but like, I have to say, like, I find him, first of all, a fascinating character, but also, like, I mean, watching the Canadian Open last week, I mean, when that guy is in the groove, is there anyone better to watch?
No, not on a day. On a day, no.
And, you know, like, I was listening to you earlier and you'd had texter in, will you give it up, like, that Rory will never win another major? I find it hard to believe. I mean, has it been 8 years since his last one? He's he had a tough day yesterday. He's left himself with a lot of work to do, but I know you've been really kind of vocal about it too, JD, and that, you know, you've been impressed with how he's kind of spoken up for it, and I would totally agree with you. I think, you know, it takes Rory McIlroy hasn't, you know, he doesn't want to be, I don't think, the figurehead for the kind of the morality and, you know, the good of the game, but he's taken it on himself, and like the week of a US Open, I'm sure he could do without it. I mean, in the build up, every single time he was being interviewed, he was being asked about it. I mean, in terms of, we were speaking about the mental preparation earlier in terms of GA and, you know, what players put into it. I mean, I could think of a lot more things that he'd like to be talking about than, you know, being the figurehead for this. So I've been really impressed with how he's kind of stood up to it. He won in the Canadian Open last week and had that little dig at Greg Norman as well, which I just thought was fantastic. I mean, just like to have that wherewithal, you know, on the 18th green afterwards when he'd won it was just brilliant. And just to go back to David Walsh's piece, Eddie Pepperell, he just, like, I found myself agreeing a lot with what he was saying. I don't think Lee Westwood and Ian Poulter give an SHIT, and they don't need to care. They're going to be done with the game in 3 or 4 years. Greg Norman doesn't give a crap. He can sail off into the sunset on a yacht. There's no risk for Greg Norman. He's done. And that is kind of the crux of this. It's guys, apart from your Bryson, and I was reading in, I can't remember who had it there, but apparently Hideki Matsuyama now is also possibly linked. And it'd be a real shame, like a guy like that who won the Masters, and you think of all he's done for, you know, golf in Asia and things like that. But if you just focus on the likes of your Phil Mickelsons, your Sergio Garcia, like, these guys are in the twilight of their careers, and you can see why they are doing it, because it's a money grab at the end and try and fill their pockets even more. But ultimately the question is, how much is too much? And I think it was Paul Kimmage's kind of piece touched on this. I think he was quoting someone that was saying it was an insult to people, or like, I can't remember which golfer said it, but it's to put money, or it's to put a dinner on the table is why I'm doing this. But that just doesn't ring true. It's like you want to put a Michelin star dinner on the table, and it's which restaurant you want to go to. So it leaves a sour taste, I have to say. But the golf over the last couple of days, is a perfect reminder of what these guys are walking away from. I had also picked out was it 4 of the Live Rebels made the cut? In 2, was it? I mean, there's just a perfect kind of symmetry, harmony in all of that, and you could see Phil Mickelson's struggles. But Joe Brawley is writing about this as well, and kind of, like I said at the start, takes the kind of a different approach. And like, I find myself as well, like, there's a lot of food for thought in this, because I was very curious. Like, I still think your common sports fan, your common person, doesn't really care too much about the sports washing stuff, and I genuinely do think that's true. And I was fascinated to see what kind of reaction Phil Mickelson would get, you know, the People's Champ. I've just finished reading Alan Shipnuck's book, which is excellent. I'd highly recommend it for any golf fan, like an unauthorised biography about Phil Mickelson. But he got a great reception in Brookline, despite the fact that he was stinking the joint out. So the question is, do you think people, like the common person, the common sports fan, really cares? I'm not sure they do.
No more than... It's very difficult. It's very difficult to expect of people as well, because I mean that's such a slippery slope that you can go down, and that is, I suppose, a little bit of the point of, to a degree. I don't agree with everything in Joe Brawley's article, but no more than we can't really. Most people don't really care where their food comes from or their clothes come from, or and I appreciate sports enjoyment, but it isn't. It's kind of enjoyment, but it's not really. If you took it away from your life would feel an awful lot less, rather than just something you enjoy. I don't think. What I always think with this stuff is, like, so with the Live Tour, and again, I didn't watch any of it last week, but I did see some of the clips and stuff that were going around, and obviously all of the comments around it. And what I'm amazed with these things, when there's so much money obviously available, is just how poorly they're set up. Now, my kind of thing with this thing is that you often see it in football. You often wonder, so like with Man City, say, and again, we're not talking like for like, but there's similar human rights issues and ethical issues there at the same thing. And from their point of view, with the way they've run that football club, has been so successful in the sporting sense, that they've got it all right. They got their whole process right. They put the whole back room, everything in the whole foundations of the thing right, and then Pep Guardiola comes in and takes it all away. Takes it on to the next level, like really elevates it. That's your missing piece. I was fascinated by this, that they're so prioritised players. Granted, you have to get a bit of name recognition, but guys that aren't going to be around for long. So again, maybe John, you're probably more read up on this than I am. That maybe it is with the likes of Matsuyama, and I think. Is Brooks Koepka and others been talked about?
Well, he's getting touchy at the press conference this week.
Yeah.
Why is he getting touchy?
So maybe they will, maybe this is just a big kind of bang at the start of it, and then they really put the nuts and bolts into it, and it all works out, and it's a proper credible thing. I don't know, though. I suppose going back to the thing, I don't know what you can expect of fans, really. As kind of Joe Brawley, a few things that he does point out that I would agree with, like Anthony Joshua fights in Saudi Arabia, no one thinks twice. There's a little bits around it, but at the end of the day, heavyweight championship of the world, you're going to watch that.
I think the football question is the really interesting one. So I mean, we don't have any experience of it, because, like, you know, no one has bought out like Shamrock Rovers or something. But like, let's say you were from Manchester, born and raised, and you were a Man City fan, and you went there with your dad and your granddad or your mum and your grandmother. Like, you know, it's in your blood, it's in your family. Like, that's the real one that I find kind of would be very difficult. And same for Newcastle fans, and we know how passionate their supporters are. When you've actually been ingrained in it, it's very hard to say, well, I'm just not going to go, and, you know,
it's impossible,
because it's also your outlet, you know, on a Saturday afternoon to go and watch the game with whoever it may be, and to just suddenly give that up. So I for one certainly wouldn't be, like, you know, casting aspersions on people who, like, fans who still decide to go and support their team, despite the fact that, you know, where the dirty money is coming from and things like that. Because it's very easy for us to sit here and say that, but, like, if Sligo were bought out in the morning, like, you know, Arthur, like, what, like, you know, what do you do? Like, I mean, it's such a strong part of your life. It's very difficult to just walk away from that.
That's impossible. And to be honest with you, I appreciate it might be seen written somewhat tongue-in-cheek maybe, but at the end of Joe Brawley's article, and he spends the last 3 paragraphs kind of talking about, inevitably it always comes back to the GA and why that amateurism and the ethos and everything is brilliant, and it is, and that's fine. And then there's that last line there, as my late father was inclined to say, without the GA we'd be savages like the English. Now, as a line, I appreciate the way he writes, the way everything else that he does, that he is kind of for sensationalism and for different things like that. I think it completely underestimates.
It's funny, because in the paper I'm reading here, I don't see without the GA would be savages, is all I see here.
Oh yeah, well no, that's what it, as my late father, so that's on the
online. Well, it's not in the paper. Okay.
well, that's what I am. I've not made it up.
Late second thing last night. Arthur's after getting the censored version.
But I think that completely underestimates if you take that as a microcosm and you take football clubs in England, and like they're intensely important to people in Ireland, let alone people in England. And as you're saying, if someone grows up in North London, if someone grows up in Manchester, Liverpool, wherever it is, that club means as much to them as Derry GA means to Joe Brolly. And there's no two ways about that. He can kind of write that up whatever way they want and kind of frame that and reframe that to do with ethics and the amateurism and everything else. But that's nonsense. Just because football's professional does not mean it does not mean as much. And when you inevitably, because it is professional and because it is the world's most popular sport and it is just eminently sellable, there's going to be money that comes in. But I don't like the outlook. And again, I don't like the outlook that it devalues the individuals who follow it or the individuals for whom it is a family affair.
Capitalist world.
Yeah, and look, the same thing is writing about the same, like when the GA and when Sky Sports came in involved to show games. And then it's like, so that's the reality. That was an avenue, as you're saying, a capitalistic avenue open to the GA to earn more money.
To put back into the association.
Exactly, and it was taken. And like...
But you're, in terms of a straw man, your 80-year-old uncle can't watch.
Can't, grand, okay, I appreciate that.
And your volunteer can't watch.
And look, I'm not saying that the situation with football in the Premier League is perfect. There's been countless people for whom it was incredibly important, just priced out of it. It's not a good thing. I'm not saying that what's happening there is a good thing in the slightest, but I think to sort of demonise the people who follow those teams as if they're somewhat participating in it, it's pawns. No more than most sports fans are pawns. Like, again, it's very, very difficult. I don't know. I don't know what...
Life is grey, and I don't think there's a black and white answer to this. I think with Live, why Live has got more possible attention than other things, it's corporate America, first of all, that's been taken on here by the Saudis. That's the first thing. And the Americans don't like the disruption to their corporate gilded world. The Formula One race goes to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is not taken over Formula One. A boxing match happens in Saudi Arabia. Boxing is not being taken over by Saudi Arabia. Qatar hosts a World Cup. It's unsavoury. The 6,000 people have died. None of us should be watching it, but we will watch it. We'll be able to put that moral judgment in a compartment in our minds and forget about it for a month, and we'll all still watch it. But they're not taking over a sport. The Saudis are taking over golf. That's what the attempt here is. It's a hostile takeover of a sport to turn this into exhibitions versus competition. I think that's what has got people so exercised, because we're all invested in this. We're all watching the US Open. We all feel we have a piece of investment as fans, and people make all their money out of advertisers and broadcast deals, and that's how they make their money. If nobody watched it, we all like to think that this thing wouldn't happen. What the Saudis are putting in front of our faces is that if nobody watched this, we'd still do it. We'd still pay the golfers. And that is the scary thing about it. What a sport without competition. We think there's a purity to it when we sit down and we escape from our lives, which sometimes can be cloudy and difficult. And for 4 hours, we can watch Rory and Seamus Power and like these players play like duffers and remind ourselves that, when we mess up on the golf course, it's actually all right. But then when that's taken away and these guys just going around the golf course with no fans and no interest and getting millions and millions of dollars, you're kind of thinking, what is the point? So there's a challenge to the consumer. There's a challenge to the structure in America. There's a geopolitical issue to this, I think, with the fact that there's an ego in Saudi Arabia, MBS, that there's a degree of strain between the Saudis and the US government, and I'm maybe over analysing this too much, but I do think golf is very much a symbolic of American power, and there's a degree of challenge to that golf does not like. And therefore, there's a huge heightened attention on what the Saudis are doing, and you're bringing all the 9/11 conversation into it. Whereas, Formula One race happens there, a boxing match happens there, a World Cup happens in Qatar, there's less of an outrage, which is, in some ways, you could say double standards. There's an independent contractor argument to this. There's an antitrust argument to it. That these players, if you left one organisation to go to another organisation, were paid a lot more money, you can understand it. But sport is not typical business. The Paul Kimmage article is interesting because there's a quote from Colin Byrne, the Irish caddy. I wouldn't want to play golf for a living, he told me once. It's a tough job. They're very talented people, and every time you tee up in the game tests you to the core. But what I've found over the years is what you get these guys who play well, and suddenly they're experts in everything. And they never want to speak to you on the same level. They're always looking down on you. And any relationship I want to have has to be on the same level. I've been brought up with the game, but the modern golf environment just seems to be elitist, money-grabbing, materialistic. It smacks of everything nouveau. I don't enjoy that. There's a tremendous history of golf. The people I enjoy are the people who are genuinely interested in the game. But money's dominating everything now. It doesn't attract deep-thinking people. And on Graham McDowell, at the very end of the piece, Graham McDowell writes, Paul Kimmage was raised in a 3-bedroom terrace house in Portrush in 2015. My last time to interview him, he made $9.3 million. His golf had started to slip, but he had blue chip sponsors. He was brilliant with the corporates. He'd won a major. People liked him. There was talk of a seat at CBS. Then he signs for the Saudi Tour, sets himself on fire. It's Tuesday afternoon in Boston. Rory McIlroy's walking up the 18th fairway, looking at the screenshot of the Belfast Telegraph. Front page, big headline, McDowell, I'm proud of what I'm doing for Saudi. He shakes his head and returns my phone. I want you to ask you a question you can't answer, says Paul Kimmage. Go on, he says. What did you think when Graham torched himself last week in London? He pauses. One word will do, I say. You used 4 on Phil. He thinks about it. Sad. So that was a great way of finishing an article on Live Golf in the Sunday Independent today.
Yeah, like, and it is sad. That's ultimately what it is. I mean, Graham McDowell was being spoken about as a future Ryder Cup captain.
And a Dare Manor of all places.
You know, like that, like
in your home county.
Like, and that is dream stuff. And you talk about, you know, what golf has done in these shores. And David Walsh raises a good point as well. Like, there's uncertainty about what the DP World Tour, European Tour does next. One school of thought says the Tour's legal advice discourages banning players who jump ship. Another says that the Tour's sponsors would not support suspensions that lessen the quality of tournament fields. And I think that is a crucial issue in all of this. Like, what does it mean for the European Tour? Because Eddie Pepperell is making the point that in 10 years, or even maybe sooner, 5 years, the European Tour could be no more. And the guys like your Sergio Garcia, your Westwood, your Poulter, like the European Tour made these guys, and yet they're the ones who could ultimately be bringing it down. And I just don't understand like how someone like Graham McDowell would risk his whole reputation to earn more money than what he already has. Now, like, I thought the Phil Mickelson book was a bit eye-opening in that it was a reminder that, look, you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. Like, allegedly he's got huge gambling debts that he's looking to pay off. Like, you don't know what's going on in the background, that why there is such a hunger and a need to earn more and more money. Like Paul Kimmage says, the last time he had interviewed him, he'd earned 9.3 million. I mean, just McDowell, yeah. I just don't know where you draw the line for these guys, and clearly there is no line, and that's ultimately what it is. They don't see.
Well, the line is, we've been offered a huge lucrative deal at the twilight of our careers for a lot of these golfers to set up their lives for their family and themselves, and I can understand that. The issue, like, just say it's for the money. Just, this is for the money. I'm doing this for money. And then people go, you know what, actually, I appreciate your honesty. Yeah. But don't tell me you're trying to grow the game. Don't tell me that Live is exciting. We got shotgun starts, got 54 holes. We're going to make golf appeal to... Nah, give me a break. Mm-hmm. Give me a break. The golfing appeal is what we've seen the last couple of days. An amazing course in Boston, 156 players. Anybody could qualify for that US Open, did. And Will Zalatoris, Matt Fitzpatrick have never won in America in a big tournament, leading the US Open, being to win a first major. Rory McIlroy, Seamus Parrott, ranked 446th in the world at the end of 2019, and now is not an outside chance to win a major title. A guy from Waterford who grinded away on the PGA Tour. That's what these are the stories. There's no story out of a Live Golf Tour event. Now maybe that will change. Maybe there'll be an uneasy alliance at the end of this. The key thing about the Live Tour is ranking points. Mm-hmm. If they get ranking points, then the players can get into the majors. You can have a degree of rival tours. If they don't get ranking points, they're not going to be seen at the majors unless they're at the Masters, which is an invitational, because they won't be able to get in. That's the key thing, is whether the Live gets the ranking points or not, and that's up to the governing bodies of golf to decide. So it's a tricky one, and it's probably going to go to the courts.
The Ryder Cup is important as well, isn't it? I mean, you mentioned ranking points getting into the majors, but the Ryder Cup has to play a major issue as well. Like, I mean, there's a news piece in the Sunday Indo about, it could come a point where they might not be allowed to play Ryder Cup. And you think back to Graham McDowell, he won his major and stuff, but like so many, when you think of these golfers, so many of them, particularly Sergio as well, you think of the Ryder Cup and they're synonymous with it. So these guys aren't allowed to play, not necessarily about these guys, but the guys coming through who do decide to go. It's a massive kick in the teeth for them.
OK, we've got to take a break on the Sunday paper review. Arthur James O'Dea and Cian Tracy. Lots more to talk about. The US Open itself, what happened on the course. We'll also talk about the Irish Tour to New Zealand, the origin around that, and the Nations League and Stephen Kenny. We're back after this.
The Sunday papers
on Off the Ball.
Lunchtime Live.
On Lunchtime Live this week, do people ever mispronounce your name?
Some of my personal favourites are corn and chlorine. Corrine, crone, it's just Corinne.
Cahan is the name. I get Con quite often. Cahill is the classic, and Cotton.
One guy called me Hosanna, and I'm not that tally.
Lunchtime Live with Andrea Gilligan.
Brought to you by Avant Money.
Weekdays at midday on News Talk.
Looking for a great value break in Ireland this summer? GoBreaks.ie will find the best hotel deals for you from just €85 per night.
Go Breaks.
Dedication is a choice. Courage, belief, all choices. Supporting your county during the All-Ireland Championship, well, that's more than a choice, that's pure passion. That's why we choose to sponsor the GAA All-Ireland Hurling Championship. And why every day in villages, towns and cities all across Ireland, we are choosing community. Because we know that great communities don't happen by chance, they happen by choice. Community matters. We choose community. Centra. Live every day.
At Circle K, when you fill, support Jack and Jill. Simply scan your Circle K loyalty app every time you buy miles AA quality approved fuel and help get Jack and Jill nurses to families nationwide. Fill up at Circle K and support local today. Participating sites only. Exclude Circle K Express Northern Ireland. Visit circlek.ie for details.
To demonstrate Citroen's advanced comfort technology, we will be recording this ad inside a Citroen while driving on a bumpy, potholed country road. Okay, here we go. Citroen's progressive hydraulic cushion suspension filters out bumps and dips in the road, so that instead of talking like this, I'm talking like this. And the sound-insulated cabin reduces exterior noise, so we don't get to hear this. But instead, we hear this. So, after more than 100 years of pioneering technology, we've made a car so comfortable we can record a radio ad in it. Citroen, engineered for comfort. See citroen.ie.
InsureMyVan.ie. Hi, I'm Ken Doherty. For all van drivers and business owners, InsureMyVan.ie is Ireland's low-cost van and commercial insurance specialist. For high-quality van and all commercial insurances, call InsureMyVan.ie.
City Financial Marketing Group Limited, trading as InsureMyVan.ie, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
It's been won again. Someone in Dublin won the €3.6 million Lotto jackpot. That's 2 Lotto jackpot winners in May alone. Let's be having you, June. The National Lottery. It could be you. Play responsibly. Play for fun.
Are you on a low income and worried about an expense or bill that you can't afford? The Department of Social Protection is here to help. The additional needs payment is available to support you with additional expenses, such as utility bills, fuel costs, or repairs to your property, or even a broken washing machine. It's available to anyone on a low income who needs it and qualifies, whether you're currently on a social welfare payment or working. This support is provided by the Department's Community Welfare Service. To find out more, visit gov.ie/ANP or call 0818 607 080. A Government of Ireland initiative.
With inflation rising, we're all feeling the squeeze. But OnPos Money can help you take the power back. Start today with our free Money Manager tool for current account holders, helping you track your income and spending, set and stick to budgets, and much more. Ready to take the power back? Visit onpos.com/money manager. OnPos is authorised by the Minister for Finance to provide payment services and is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland in the provision of such services.
The Sunday Papers
on Off the Ball.
And you're welcome back to Off the Ball here on News Talk. John Duggan with you 3 to 7, sitting in for Joe Malloy today on the Sunday Paper Review with Cian Tracy from the Irish Independent Rugby Writer and Arthur James O'Dea from OTB Sports. Just going through some scores here in the Charlton Cup semi-final. Cavan 11 points, Sligo 1-3. We also have in ladies football, so half-time in the Senior Football Championship, Galway 10 points, Westmeath 3. Half-time Cork 2-9, Donegal 1-2. Latest score is Cavan 5 points, Mayo 11. Also in the Football Championship. So that's what's going on there at the moment. We also have Tipperary and Dublin in action, and we'll come to that in a moment. So that is Dublin against Tipperary, and the latest score there is half-time. Dublin 1-3, Tipperary 3 points. That's what's going on around the houses in the Ladies Football Championship. Just before we kind of move away from golf, Dermot Gilleese who was a friend of OTB and of News Talk here. His last US Open, writing about it in the Sunday Independent, Cian. Open road leads onto memory lane.
Yeah, it's a really nice piece. It's kind of away from the kind of live controversy and the head wreck that is. And yeah, like Dermot Leese is just such a brilliant storyteller. I'm sure you'd agree, JD. Like every time he's in here and off the ball, like he's always a must listen. He's
the history man. He lots of stories about going to these tournaments and the characters he met, and it's a refreshing way. There's not enough of that in I think in writing and sports writing. It's very much match report based or opinion based, and sometimes it's not historical enough for. This is the way the sport has changed over the years, or these are the characters I met, and these are the stories of the people I met, and that's the one thing that he's able to do in a very original way, I find.
Yeah, it's old school, and I mean, like, God, he's covered like so much of the golf calendar, like over his illustrious career. And I think, like, when I started in the Irish Independent, Carl McGinty was kind of just finishing up, and he was another one who was fantastic at telling the old stories and like the scrapes that he used to get into on their travels. But yeah, like the one thing I find about when I'm reading Dermot Leese's pieces and when I'm listening to him when he's in here is that he paints such brilliant, vivid images that you feel like you're there with him, and like that is like such a special kind of trait in a writer. I'd love to be able to have it myself, maybe one day. But yeah, like he's writing about that. The last US Open he did was Martin Keimer's triumph at Pinehurst in 2014, and he's kind of talking about the stress of going through Dublin Airport and going through US immigration and stuff, and basically why he won't miss having to do these long treks, which I have to say, when I was reading that, it was making me less kind of excited about what awaits me in Dublin Airport on Wednesday when I'm going to New Zealand. But yeah, he just it's kind of a through the years of his own kind of experiences, and he finishes with a kind of a funny paragraph where he says, finally, I'm not reading anything into my designated seat in the media centre, which is beside 83-year-old Art Spander, a legendary figure in American golf writing. He's been telling me that his first US Open was in 1966 at the Olympic Club, where he was first working for the San Francisco Chronicle. One of our younger brethren had the temerity to describe us as the Sunshine Boys, that our position at the top centre aisle facilitated easy first aid access if necessary. Still, it's been a long, fascinating road. I just thought it was a brilliant way to end, and there's a really nice picture as well. I feel like every time I'm in doing the papers with you guys, I always kind of point out the importance of the pictures that go with the pieces and how like it's laid out and stuff. But there's a really brilliant, like, simple picture of Dermot Leese at work yesterday from the press room at the US Open in Brookline, and it's just like there's no one else around him. It's a kind of a lonely shot, but God, what a career he's had. I mean,
fantastic. Yeah,
just an amazing writer.
Yeah, went to the Masters we're talking about 3 decades going to the Masters, and almost like one of those old school boxing riders, isn't it? The American boxing riders.
It's a very interesting tradition, all those things. Just as well, I remember not too long ago, I think it was after, I think he made it over 100, Roger Angel, the New Yorker writer, I think, who kind of wrote about baseball. I think he died not too long ago, but he lived to a fantastic age. But it was a similar sort of thing. Like, what I didn't realise, like, this guy was just loaded. I kind of knew the name, and I wouldn't be a big baseball fan, so I read little bits of him. And then I was listening to this interview he'd done a few years ago, I think with David Remnick for the New Yorker. And he was talking about, I didn't realise he'd been the fiction editor of the New Yorker. And his sports writing was just something he did kind of as a hobby at home. Like, now maybe that changed at different times, but that was certainly the genesis of it. It wasn't that he was this, I just couldn't believe it. I was like, it's just that, it's like, God almighty, there's talent. It's like just this, it's amazing what people, which when given time, and when given, like, and when I suppose your subject so intimately as the likes of Dermot Leese does, that it's amazing what you come up with.
It's a different gig as well, I think, like that kind of colour writing, because I know it as well from covering rugby matches, particularly like the big Six Nations games. One person will be given the task to write a colour, and it's very different to writing a match report, and oftentimes it's much better because you're not doing the kind of rudimentary, the ABC and the scores and stuff, and obviously you have that report, but like the essence of like your Sunday papers, your daily papers of sports journalism is that kind of colour-y type writing, and there's few who do it better than than Dermot Gleeson. Like, you know, I was just kind of telling you, like, at the break that, you know, he was obviously around covering Greg Norman in his pomp, but I don't quite remember Greg Norman, you know, when he was, you know, a bit too young for that. But at the golf course back home where I used to play in Shannon, on the 18th, just off the fairway, there's a plaque marking an enormous drive. I can't think off the top of my head how many yards it was, that Greg Norman hit. I think it was back in the 80s, maybe early 90s. And every time I played that hole, like when I was younger particularly, it was always like, okay, can I get up to Greg Norman's? You know, it was like this mythical thing, shot in two. And as you got older, like, you were getting closer and closer, never quite got next or near hitting it. But Greg Norman was always this kind of like, wow, like, you know, he played here, and it was, like I said, this mythical figure. And now all of a sudden you're like, oh, you know, I don't think I'll look at the plaque the same again.
Well, maybe if you hit the plaque, you'll actually get an invite into the lift tour.
Yeah, and I'd have a big
and all
question
the riches, the associated riches that come with it.
Yeah, but it goes back to our point about reputation, doesn't it? I mean, like I said, I knew who Greg Norman was, but it was just how did he hit the ball here? I don't think I'd look at the plaque the same way now anymore. That's the reality of it.
We need more colour riders, I think. A lot of riding is about the what happened, and we can all, I think, have an opinion on the what, but it's the how and the why, and I think that's what Dermot Gleeson has been able to do very well. Like, you have George Kimball, the late George Kimball of who wrote in America about boxing, and I remember Bert Sugar and all these kind of characters, and these are the kind of people you just go. I always go straight to the colour people if I can. I don't think there are enough of them in sport, but it's been incredible entertainment, Arthur, hasn't it? The US Open, like it is just absolutely fantastic. It's like going to the cinema for 4 hours.
Yeah. God, yeah, it felt longer than that.
A lot longer. If you were going off my TV yesterday, I got the old reminder that I needed to adjust the box. I was watching it that long.
Our TV was getting hot.
Yeah,
very, very hot. But it was unbelievable, John. And like I'd be guilty of. I'd only generally watch the four majors. That'd be kind of my thing for it. But
that'll be the way it is now, anyway. After live.
Yeah. Well, it's just I probably hadn't. I don't know if I've ever seen a competition before where the course was having such a detrimental sort of impact to the game. It was really fascinating, even how they developed across the day. And I was fascinated by when you were watching it. Like, God, we were watching it, I think basically from Clare Wexford match was over onward, so through to whatever it was, 1 o'clock. And I just love the fact that all of a sudden you're seeing, I've seen such and such come through this 13th now. How's Rory McIlroy going to approach it? And it was just, I just found it fascinating. The challenge, and it was tough for them sometimes, because you're kind of, inevitably you're kind of cheering for Rory and you're hoping he does well, but you're seeing how difficult it is. And I think that does, God, it adds a whole other dimension to it. It is fascinating to see how they battle with it.
That's the best thing about the US Open. Obviously, the Masters is the holy grail, and if you were to have one course where you could play, absolutely, that is at the top of your head. And I don't think too many amateurs or scrubbers like myself would have any great desire to play Brookline, but there was something sadistic about I was watching Xander Schauffele yesterday, chipping in the ball, just coming back to him, because you made the point earlier, JD, it does make you feel a little bit better about yourself. Even John Ram on the 18th yesterday, not getting out of that bunker. I mean, these guys are human at the end of the day, but this course, and I was just reading a couple of tweets from American golf journalists who were there at the moment, and apparently it's even worse now as in the conditions. So
brilliant, bring it on.
Exactly, yeah. We were watching Rory last week at the Canadian Open. What did he win on, 17?
Yeah, it was the high teens,
something like that. Yeah, and that's all well and good, but I mean, this score could come down even less than 4 under what the leaders are, today, and that is fascinating, because that is ultimately what the US Open is about, isn't it? It's the tough courses in the tough conditions, and we're certainly getting that.
Well, I think this is a different Rory we're seeing. It's a fighting Rory. It's fire in the belly. He did not have his game at all yesterday. In previous majors, I would have seen him have his game, but then lose the head or let the shoulders drop or the head go down. And I haven't seen that at all from Rory in the last few days. And that to me is the work he's done with Brad Faxon on putting and Bob Rotella on the mind. And I think that whether he wins tonight or not, I think there is a major coming soon for Rory, possibly at St Andrews. Seamus Power, I'll just say to anybody out there, I know this is a first world probably conversation, but I was in Lahinch in 2019. Seamus Power finished 60th. He'd come back from America. He was in the 400s in the world. Nobody wanted to do interviews with him, relative to the other stars on show at the time. And I kind of felt sorry for him at the time, just observing his struggles, as it were. And to see him now, 41st in the world, top 10 in the PGA, now only 5 shots off the lead, another huge finish in prospect at the US Open. It's just a real example of determination, believing in yourself, and that you can turn it around. So I'm just so delighted for Seamus Power and for the people who are behind him from Waterford to the US.
I know he probably hasn't had that flagship win yet, but for me, he has to be one of the most underrated Irish sports people at the moment. Like you said, his from rag to riches story is incredible, but it's his consistency is remarkable. And like, he turned up again yesterday, and he had an unbelievable eagle. I think it was on the 8th, and he battled back. He showed some of the similar qualities that Rory did, but I mean, I think his progress is still flying under the radar. I mean, if you ask any Irish golf fan, of course they'll know who Seamus Power is, but I'd say if you asked any Irish casual sports fan, they probably wouldn't know who Seamus Power is. And maybe it will take a good finish tonight for him to kind of get into people's consciousness, but I mean, his story is truly remarkable. And just to touch on the point you made about Rory, JD, I thought it was very interesting. Like, the putting has always been the big thing with Rory, but what I thought was fascinating yesterday was he didn't hold a putt in the front nine at all, and he could easily have let his head drop, but the amount of par putts he made coming into the back,
8-1 putts,
like in 9 holes, was it?
Yeah, before the last one, up to 17. Yeah.
Like, that is remarkable for a guy who wasn't. He's been putting well actually over the first couple of days, but wasn't putting well in the early stages of his third round, and then still didn't let his head drop. Like, I think that is one of the biggest turning points we've seen, because was it a 73 he shot, and it was probably one of the best 73s he's shot in his career, so he's not out of it yet either.
The difficulty of it's remarkable. Like, and I was kind of looking at this last night, and we probably do a slight disservice, not necessarily the three of us in this room, but slight disservice to McIlroy in terms of what he's achieved. And I'm fascinated you're talking about Seamus Power as well, like, and I suppose just the gradations in golf of what success is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm fascinated by the fact, I was looking at this last night, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm kind of going from them, I think I was looking at it after, so from when Woods won his first in 97, and he's won 15 majors, right? Yes. And then thereafter, I think the next who's won the most in that time is Mickelson with 6.
Yes.
And then thereafter Rory with 4, and I think a few others. So that's like in the modern thing. Yeah. Like, it's outrageous. It's outrageous how, like, when you put it in those terms and you think of how flooded the golf field is with kind of people who could, and how, like, it's so funny when you're listening to the commentary as well, and obviously they know these guys intimately, and they're kind of talking about how good this player is at this, and like, oh, they are excellent at this, and it's like, I've never heard of them, and you're kind of, it's just remarkable. It's remarkable what he's done.
Well, Will Zalatoris has never won a tournament in America. Like, PGA Tour. Matt Fitzpatrick has never won a tournament in America. Rory's won 21, and he's won 4 majors, as you say. Lee Westwood never won a major. Ian Poulter would never won a major. Oh, by the way, they're going to the Live Tour. Sergio Garcia won 1 major, and all the talent he had. Colin Montgomery never won a major. Luke Donald never won a major.
And then you think, sorry, what brought that up in my mind was Harrington, which is just like, I know you're taking an eye on the time as well. I know you could keep you here till 4 o'clock talking about Porrick Harrington, but I just.
Well, Harrington is the greatest ever sports person in my view, because Harrington got the most out of his talent. Now, Rory has had God-given talent since he was chipping those balls into the washing machine, and I think Rory's done very well in his career. It's just that we have these unrealistic expectations, I think.
Yeah.
It's like
you become a victim of your own success. You really do. Like, Rory's career has been amazing. We see it in other sports as well. Like, I mean, with Leinster, like, they're judged on such high standards, but they're ultimately standards that you've created for yourself, and Rory is like that as well. So I go back to the texter, like, just, oh, Rory will never win a major again, and it's just like why would you say that when he's clearly one of the best golfers in the world and of his generation? And that is an important point of this as well. You kind of touched on it, Arthur. This is a golden generation of golfers when you look at the quality of young American players. Like, you mentioned Will Zalatoris coming through, John, but you think of Justin Thomas, Bryson DeChambeau, Scotty Scheffler, who looked human for the first time ever yesterday. So to achieve what you have, and that goes back to the point about Seamus Power even making it on the PGA Tour and being consistent in it. Like, golf is obviously such a worldwide game, but the number of people trying to make it into that very, very small bracket is unreal. So yeah, I think like guys like that should be acknowledged more, and definitely Seamus Power deserves more recognition than what he's getting.
Keegan Tracy and Arthur James O'D are with us on the Sunday paper review. If you want to text an opinion or a question, you can do so on 53106. We're on the air with this part of the show until 3:30. We're on the air in total until 7 o'clock here and Off the Ball on News Talk this Sunday afternoon. John Duggan sitting in for Joe Malloy. It is Cavan 14 points, Sligo 1 goal and 8 in the Charlton Cup semi-final. There's 48 minutes on the watch. Stay with us, don't go away folks, because we're back after the news.
The Sunday papers
on Off the Ball.
Listen to News Talk on Smart Speaker. Play News Talk.
Dedication is a choice. Courage, belief, all choices. Supporting your county during the All-Ireland Championship, well, that's more than a choice, that's pure passion. That's why we choose to sponsor the GAA All-Ireland Hurling Championship. And why every day in villages, towns and cities all across Ireland, we are choosing community. Because we know that great communities don't happen by chance, they happen by choice. Community matters. We choose community. Centra. Live every day.
There's never been a better time to switch to Electric Ireland. We're offering all new customers a €170 welcome bonus with our 2-year deal. All you have to do is call 1800 30 50 90 or visit electricireland.ie. For your welcome bonus, switch to Electric Ireland today. Estimated annual bill €2,404. Electricity and gas discounted unit rate including standing charge, PSO levy and carbon tax. 24-month contract. T's and C's apply. See electricireland.ie.
Style, design inspiration and incredible savings in store. Easy Living Interiors summer sale is everything you want and more. A plush velvet sofa, a fabric chair, a designer dining set, a luxury mattress, garden furniture and our biggest discounts yet. Create your style for less at Easy Living Interiors. For expert advice and fast delivery, shop in-store or online now. Easy Living Interiors, Cork, Waterford, Navan, Naas, Wexford, Sandyford, Drogheda and Carlow. Summer sale now on.
So how's your constipation these days, Patsy?
Oh, I've been taking fibre gel. It's full of fibre, which naturally relieves constipation and helps maintain regularity.
Fabulous. My constipation is much more mild, so I take the chewable tablets from fibre gel.
Oh.
Super convenient. Just pop it in your mouth to make number 2 a little less of a to-do.
Mum, Patsy, I am never coming to tea with you again.
Fibergel High Fibre Orange Granules contains this. Pagula Husk, always read the label. Fibergel Fibre Chews is a medical device, always read the instructions.
When Peugeot created the new 308, they didn't just reinvent the wheel, they reinvented the whole car. It's a new concept in interior space with technology like customizable iToggles for on-screen shortcuts, wireless Apple CarPlay, Android Auto and the new iCockpit for premium comfort and visibility. The Peugeot 308 with high performance and low emissions. It's an all-new driving experience. Test drive the hybrid petrol or diesel 308 at your local Peugeot dealer today.
And Sean's nipped into the bar for a quick chat with the work crowd. He won't stop. He has a match in the morning. But wait, a nod from the barman. There's Guinness 0-0 on tap. The chapter back on. Sean is in full swing and a fresh pint is handed over the bar. Guinness 0-0, 100% Guinness, 0% alcohol. Proud partner of Croke Park Stadium and proud partner of the GAA.
Visit drinkaware.ie.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Open your Bunk business account in just 5 minutes with automated budgets, integrated bookkeeping and much more. Business banking that makes life easy. Go to bunq.com and get started today.
Bunk BV is authorised by the Nederlandse Bank in the Netherlands and is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland for conduct of business rules.
Have you ever wondered why we laugh?
You don't know, it's just an observation.
Or if you can really die of a broken heart?
So try to sort of unwind.
Join Professor Luke O'Neill on the Show Me the Science podcast as he tackles a different issue each week, from the serious to the silly, all explained through science.
Science is just about watching something and observing something and then measuring it.
New episodes available every Thursday on the News Talk app, powered by Go Loud. On 106 to 108 FM, on the News Talk app, powered by Go Loud and smart speakers. This is News Talk.
Good afternoon, I'm Lindsay Dolan. Revenue have seized heroin and cocaine worth €1.3 million at Rosslare Port. Officers discovered the drugs when they stopped and searched a trailer from Dunkirk in France. A man in his 30s has been arrested and taken to Wexford Garda station for questioning. The Taoiseach says the government's aim is to make comprehensive changes in the budget to ease inflationary pressures. That's despite newspaper reports today indicating a boost in social welfare and fuel supports next month. Micheál Martin says the summer economic statement is up next, but he doesn't see any measures taking effect until after the budget.
That's not planned for now, and we will meet again. Obviously, government will meet on this. There will be a meeting this week in terms of the three-party leaders and the Ministers of Finance and Public Expenditure to discuss the summer economic statement in the first instance, because that's very important in terms of the overall amount of money that will be available to us.
An investigation's been launched after a man died in Drumshanbo in County Leitrim. Gardaí were called to the scene after reports a person had collapsed. Officers discovered a man in his 50s who was pronounced dead a short time later. A Dublin TD says customers shouldn't have to bear the brunt of the taxi price increase being announced in September. But Deputy Neil Richmond said drivers shouldn't suffer either. He said there are other options.
We have to cut the cost of being a taxi driver. We need to cut the licence fee. We need to cut the fee for permits in Dublin Airport. And we need to look at all the various different regulations are required, some of which are a little bit excessive and can be slimmed down. The proposal from the NTA is just to increase fares by 12%. That is in nobody's interest. It won't benefit the drivers and it certainly won't benefit the consumers and the passengers.
Finally, the cost of living crisis is forcing Irish consumers to change the cuts of meat they buy in the butchers. Jack Malloy from Malloy's Craft Butchers in Waterford is president of the Association of Craft Butchers of Ireland. He said the Sunday roast may be toast, but you can still have a cold shoulder.
Butchers are responding by putting on offers on kind of the cheaper cuts, pork shoulder or lamb shoulder, the premium cuts of steaks and things like that. I've certainly seen a fall off in sales. So we're trying to be a little bit more creative, and certainly now we're coming into the summer, kind of barbecue bundle packs, that type of thing.
It's 3:02.
News Talk weather.
Thanks to Ryanair. Father's Day is on the way. Swap the socks for a Ryanair gift card.
Bright and breezy this afternoon with sunny spells, highs of 17 or 18 degrees. Now you're up to date on News Talk.
The Sunday Papers
on Off the Ball.
And you're welcome back to Off the Ball here on News Talk for your Sunday afternoon. John Duggan sitting in for John Malloy on the Sunday Paper Review with Cian Tracy, rugby writer of the Irish Independent, and Arthur James O'Dea from OTB Sports. Going through the best writing of your Sunday. It is exciting, this Tailteann Cup. You can't say it's not. Cavan 16 points, Sligo 111, 2 points between them, 55 minutes on the watch at Croke Park. Westmeath and Offaly throw in at 4. In the Ladies Gaelic Football All-Ireland Senior Championship, latest scores sponsored by TG4. Cavan 2-8, Mayo 15 points at Pearse Park. Well into the second half there. It's Tipperary 3 points, Dublin 1-3 in Temple Toohey. Galway lead Westmeath by 10 points to 3 at Chim Stadium, and in Clane it is Cork 2-9, Donegal 1 goal and 2 points. So Cian Tracy, you're going off to New Zealand. What is the best rugby writing of a Sunday?
There's a couple of kind of look back pieces from Peter O'Reilly in the Sunday Times, Brendan Fanning kind of doing similar in the Sunday Independent. Bernard Jackman's column is always worth a read. I think he's been a great addition to the Sunday Indo, kind of, a bit of an analytical view. And John, you kind of talked about a bit of colour, like there's always a bit of colour in Bernard Jackman's piece. And Neil France is also writing in the Sunday Times about sort of Leinster and Ireland's set piece woes, really, which I think is definitely worth talking about as well. But Peter O'Reilly's piece kind of, I suppose, sets it up well before the tour. I mean, it's kind of, we're in that kind of strange phase now where the URC final was yesterday, and it kind of went under a lot of people's radar, I guess, because it was an all South African final. And I watched it was decent enough, but it was a strange day actually, because not a strange day. It was a great day of rugby on paper, because you kind of started at 8:30 yesterday morning with the Super Rugby final between the Crusaders and the Blues, which, like, I was writing about this on Saturday, that it was a real kind of taster of what's to come for Ireland. I think in New Zealand you had the two best New Zealand teams. I think it was 20 or 21 All Blacks on show. The weather was horrific in Auckland, which is where the first stop of Ireland's, the first test, is going to be on Saturday 2 weeks, or Saturday week now at this stage. So yeah, it was interesting. And Neil Francis is writing about this, about kind of Ireland's, Leinster's line-out struggles, but any problem that Leinster have, Ireland have the same problem for obvious reasons, because Leinster are going to be the bulk suppliers to the team, you'd imagine. Again, Neil Francis is writing about how the Bulls basically picked off Leinster's line-out last weekend in the semi-final, and it is a big concern, because obviously Ireland are going to be without now Ronan Kelleher, who's first choice hooker, and Dan Sheehan is definitely an able replacement, but I think you're going to miss having that 1-2 punch with Kelleher starting and Dan Sheehan coming off the bench. And I think there's big issues over Ireland's scrum, because Leinster scrum has been kind of picked apart a couple of times over the last few weeks as well, particularly in Europe. But they conceded a lot of penalties in their quarter final against Leinster and against Leicester, and in the semi-final against Toulouse. So there's no doubt teams are looking at it as a chance to get at Leinster and Ireland. And the line out is something interesting as well, because one of the big takeaways I had from the Super Rugby final yesterday was Sam Whitelock was back for the Crusaders and did a number on the Blues line-out, like just an incredible performance. But it was a real kind of warning for Ireland in terms of what to expect. Like, this guy is one of the best locks in the world, and like I said, just picked off the Blues line-out, and it just strangleholded them, didn't give them any foothold in the game, and Crusaders ultimately ran out winners. But Neil Francis is kind of writing about I suppose the art of calling, and you know, he was obviously a line-out caller back in the day, but he's talking about a hooker, and he says sometimes at this level a hooker gets bamboozled if he can't pick his space in the line-out. If it was easy when there was only one person jumping up for it, it is like when you were teeing off and there is a river to your left. You try not to look at the water, but you know you are going to hook the ball into the drink. No river there, and you will drive the ball straight. Even if the hooker gets the ball to where it is supposed to go, if you are going to challenge it, there's a good chance that you can pick it off. That mentality should be that every opposition throw should be considered your own ball. And it's a good little insight into, you know, it's a good analogy. We spent so much time talking about the golf and, you know, standing on the first tee, or any tee for that matter, what the nerves must be like. But you can imagine a hooker kind of looking down the line of a line out, and it's such a narrow target to hit. And yeah, I think it's an issue that, like, Ireland are going to have to work on. And you know, Neil Francis is touching on kind of Leinster's, you know, you'd have to say disappointing end to the season. They must analyse why they ended up spending large portions of most of these big matches defending their line. It almost seems like Leinster chose to defend their way to victory, and they've come up short too many times when it matters most. There will have to be small changes in their thinking on their weaknesses, and some personnel will have to be ruthlessly dispatched in the off season, or these near misses will continue. So I think a few weeks ago, before, you know, the season kind of came to a shuddering halt, you'd have to say, for the Irish Promises, I was definitely quite optimistic about Ireland's chances going down to New Zealand. I mean, you touched on it earlier, JD, they've never won down there. The All Blacks are definitely vulnerable. On home soil it's very different, but there's pressure on them. There's still a couple of positions that they're trying to figure out. They don't have this locked and loaded team that they had when they were winning World Cups, and so there's definitely sort of areas that Ireland can get out there. But there's no doubt that the way the kind of, you know, Munster season petered out really disappointingly. Connacht had a really tough year all round. Ulster, disappointing semi-final defeat, and Leinster obviously beaten in a semi-final and final. So your optimism is kind of tempered a little bit, which is probably no harm, to be fair. You know, I don't think anyone is expecting Ireland to go down there realistically to win a series. I think that would be, if they were to do that, that would be incredible. And kind of Bernard Jackman is writing about this in the Sunday Independent, and you know, the power issue has come up again, and it's never going to go away. I mean, because like Ireland just don't produce the power athletes that your South Africa, your France and your England have. But an interesting point here that Bernard Jackman makes is, this may surprise many, but the All Blacks aren't one of the most powerful teams in world rugby, and while they present a formidable challenge, even if Ireland beat them, it will do nothing to quell the doubts around our ability to beat teams that physically look to strangle us. I don't know if I would fully agree with that. I know the point he's making, that they're not quite, you know, Eben Etzebeth and Franco Mostard in the second row, these big giant, you know, locks and props up front. I know the point he's getting, but I think if Ireland were to go down and beat New Zealand on home soil, even in one test, I think that would be enormous for the psyche of Irish rugby. You know, we're going into a World Cup next year, and we already know the route that they have in terms of the pool, playing South Africa and Scotland, and if they were to get out of the pool, which you'd expect that they will, they're going to be playing France or New Zealand in a quarter final. So really it's the toughest World Cup draw you could ever have. But I think a tour in New Zealand is the ideal preparation, and particularly with the 2 extra games against the Maori All Blacks. Like I said, those games are no gimmies whatsoever. You just have to look through the quality of players that they've picked. Like TJ Perenara is very unlucky not to be in the All Black squad, and he's going to be in the Maori squad. So you're going to have guys who are trying to put their hand up to say to Ian Foster, the All Blacks head coach, you got this wrong. So it'll be very interesting to see how Andy Farrell uses those games. So we've got the first one on Wednesday week, which is a few days before the first test. So you'd imagine, like, a lot of guys that, you know, are in the squad need games. Like, you look at someone like Bundyaki, hasn't played in weeks because Connacht, and he actually missed the end of Connacht season. So it'll be interesting to see how he juggles it. He's picked a 40-man squad. There's so much potential in it, but I think there's a couple of areas that they need to get right as well, like I mentioned, around the set piece in particular.
Yeah, I'm fascinated from your point of view, just as someone who's kind of expertly watching this. So if you, in this comparison, so again, we're 1 year out from the World Cup, and I suppose obviously the 2018 was landmark for so many years for what was, as you're kind of saying now, I suppose still, like if you're saying if they go down there and if they were to even win one of those tests against the All Blacks, that it would be a big, huge achievement. I'm kind of wondering what stage they're at from your point of view compared. So from 18, it felt like everything was going to be perfect right into 19. Is there? I know, and as we were saying earlier about narratives like that, it's kind of you'll only know afterwards. But what's the best case scenario?
Well, like 2018 will always be referencing, particularly in World Cup cycles. But for me, Ireland's biggest issue was they didn't evolve in 2019. Teams figured out how to play them. And I think the last few weeks, I don't think Andy Farrell, his coaching staff, believed that this Ireland team have come anywhere near their peak. Like, they didn't win a Six Nations, they didn't win the Grand Slam like Ireland did in 2018. But I think the last few weeks, in terms of the flaws that have been showing up in Leinster's game plan, because I was certainly someone who believes that Leinster had actually figured out a way to get around these bigger teams. I mean, when you think about the semi-final defeat to La Rochelle last year, everything that they had done since then was built around in terms of evolving the game plan. How are we going to beat a team like La Rochelle? So to have actually played La Rochelle and come up short again, I personally think that it was really damaging, and I think we saw evidence of that in the Bulls game. I'm not saying it was the same like for like, but I mean, you talk about the hang up, and we go back to the very start of this conversation, we spoke about the mental side of things. So I think this particular Ireland team has still got quite a bit of a journey to go on. I think even if they were to win a test down in New Zealand, I don't think there'd be no DVDs being released about it, like, maybe like there would have been back in the day. But I think there is potential there, but I think the flaws that have been shown up have shown that they've actually got a good bit of road left to run. I mean, the out half position is always going to be up for debate. I think there's huge issues in terms of the front row depth, particularly at prop. I mean, even at lock, there's a bit of an issue there. So there are. It's not a bad place to be in at all, and this is like the ultimate test going down to New Zealand. Andy Farrell came out with a brilliant quote actually during the week where he basically said, like, this is proper test match international rugby. It's not like walking down, and I'm paraphrasing here, it's not like, walking down Ball's Bridge and someone rolls down the window and tells you, oh, you're brilliant at rugby. Doing that, like, that's not going to happen in Dunedin, Auckland, so that mental image is just brilliant, because we hear, and that's what I'm so looking forward to, like, we hear about how obsessed the Kiwis are, and that, the hostile kind of reception, and Brendan Fanning is writing about this in the Sunday Independent as well, that on one of the tours that they went on back in the day, there was no one even there to greet the Ireland team. I mean, when they arrived in New Zealand. Now, I think it's a little bit different nowadays. Obviously, like, relations are much better, but I think the respect has really changed. Like, it was a cliche for years when I was first covering the Ireland team, when the All Blacks were in town in November, that the only player that they could name or they cared about was Sean O'Brien, like, because they had ultimate respect for him, and then everyone else was just kind of a byproduct of it. And it was interesting. I marked it here. Gary Longwell in Peter O'Reilly's kind of look back piece, he's thinking back to 2002. This kind of really resonated with me about the Sean O'Brien point, because this is a comment here. If you read the local newspapers, it seemed as if Ireland consisted of O'Driscoll, Brian O'Driscoll, Keith Wood and 13 fillers in. And for years that's what it was like as well with Sean O'Brien, that they didn't really care about anyone else. But I think the respect has changed now, and the Ireland team are flying out in a couple of different batches. I think it just wasn't possible to get everyone on the same plane, so the first tranche left today. I think more are going to leave tomorrow, and there's a group of 70 altogether when you include the backroom staff as well. Like, that's an enormous undertaking. I think it's the biggest tour, I'm right in saying, that Ireland have ever undertaken, right? So when you include the 2 extra games and the 70 people, so I think there's going to be welcomes there, like there could be a couple of hackas waiting for them when everyone arrives, unlike, like Brendan Fanning says, when there was no welcome for them at all.
Yeah, the welcome Brendan Fanning, All Black Gary Weston, star second row for Auckland that day in Eden Park, at a different take on proceeding. Psychologically, they must be feeling down, he said after the 62-7 exhibition. To be honest, I'm a little disappointed in the Irish team, there's no doubt about that. I thought they would have put up a bit more of a challenge, if you like. And then wrapped up in all of this was another humdinger, where the tourists were hammered to the tune of 58 points by Manawatu, where one Joe Schmidt had yet to make his breakthrough. Their captain Stu Bundy Cruden, Aaron's old man, dipped into the Gary Wetton post-match playbook, expressed disappointment in the best Ireland had to offer, a nuggety, sinewy, hard-arse flanker. Cruden looked thoroughly pissed off at being shortchanged in the warm-up ahead of his team playing Samoa the next week, which is kind of funny stuff in the Sunday Independent today. 18 points to 15, Cavan 18 points, Sligo 112, 68 minutes into the Tailteann Cup semi-final. The Joe Schmidt conundrum, if that's it's not probably the correct word, but the aura of Schmidt is returning to rugby, and now it's in New Zealand. He's been doing stuff with the Auckland Blues. He's now, I think, a consultant in Foster. Is there a chance we might see Joe Schmidt as an All Blacks coach before long?
I would say there's a massive possibility. There is, yeah. It's interesting. Like, I mean, he said he was retiring from coaching, but I don't think anyone really believed that because he's such an obsessive about the game. And you look at like the amount of success that he's had, and sometimes when, like, and I'm very conscious of this every time I speak about the Joe Schmidt Ireland era, you can become kind of too focused on what happened in 2019 in that really disappointing year and forget about all the good stuff that came before it. Like, because it was just great. Like, it was like a pinnacle of Irish rugby, like that 2018 year. Now, we just spoke about it there. They peaked too early, but you're seeing a lot of, like, I've been watching a good bit of Super Rugby this year. You know, Joe Schmidt has been working with the Blues, and you're seeing a lot of kind of the same traits that you saw in the Ireland team. I mean, Joe Schmidt, I don't think there's anyone in world rugby really as renowned for him as, you know, creating like set piece moves. And I think he's actually been working a lot on the Blues defence and their kind of off field stuff, like creating that culture. Now, a lot of Ireland players would have said that became kind of smothering in the end, but for a while it was working and it was great. And yeah, so he's a consultant to Ian Foster, but if you're to read the small print, JD, he doesn't start until after the Ireland tour with the All Blacks. Now, I would love to be a fly on the wall and kind of see what's going on behind the scenes, because I would find it very hard to believe that if Ian Foster is getting Joe Schmidt as part of his backroom team, and he is under pressure, like I said, make no mistake about it, he is under pressure from the Kiwis a year out from the World Cup. I find it hard to believe that he's not going to tap into Joe Schmidt's knowledge of Ireland, and it just adds another fascinating layer of intrigue, I think, to the tour that's ahead. And you know, if Ireland were to, you know, win a series, as probably unlikely as it may seem, I would struggle to see how Ian Foster would stay in his job, given, and like, rugby doesn't have this like kind of fire and hire culture that football has, and I'm not suggesting that in any way, but the Kiwi public will not stand for that.
Well, they're a bit like Kerry football, aren't they? You know, they expect this victory and nothing else. That's why I always found it fascinating that Graham Henry, they kept Graham Henry after 2007 and they gave him another shot, and then he won the World Cup in 2011 at home. They're into 6 minutes of stoppage time at Croke Park. Cavan 18 points, Sligo 112 at the Tailteann Cup semi-final, so Cavan have the edge there. Scott Robertson, I think, is very popular. He was doing the breakdancing again, wasn't he, after in the rain, after the... So he'd be another popular candidate for a New Zealand head coach job if Ian Foster did fall on his sword.
He absolutely would be, but I think the reason that Joe Schmidt might be kind of even have edged ahead of him, despite the fact that the All Blacks generally want you to have been, you know, involved in the system before you kind of take on the All Blacks job, which coming into the Blues to me was a stepping stone to that, and now taking on a consultancy role with Ian Foster's background to me is another stepping stone for that. And I think Joe Schmidt is going to be a, you know, break glass in case of emergency, that if it all goes wrong for the All Blacks, that Joe Schmidt will have been in there and he'll be in place. He's done his time, albeit only one season, as in the season just gone, but he's previously worked with the Blues before. He knows the workings of New Zealand rugby. So I would say, even though I think the longer term, I think Scott Robertson is definitely going to be an All Blacks coach. I mean, the amount of European clubs that were in for him, but he's wanted to stay in New Zealand, won the Super Rugby title again with the Crusaders yesterday. But Joe Schmidt will actually be in the All Blacks setup, and I think there's more of a chance of Joe Schmidt, if again it went wrong, of Joe Schmidt coaching the All Blacks at the World Cup rather than Scott Robertson, purely for that reason, because he seems to be taking the steps into the setup, and it'd be fascinating, wouldn't it? It's just a pity that he's not more kind of hands-on now, particularly from my point of view, because going over, you'd love to be able to get to chat to him, and you know, at a press conference and things like that, and I see a friendly face. I don't know if he'd say the same about me or anyone else going over, but it would be good to see him.
Yeah, Ireland against New Zealand, the World Cup quarter final next year. Andy Farrell and Joe Schmidt. That'd be some. You'd fill a week of newspaper print with that, wouldn't you? 19 points for Cavan, 112 for Sligo. 72 minutes into the Tailteann Cup semi-final. The 6 minutes of stoppage time to be played. Just to finish the rugby, even the first paragraph of Peter O'Reilly's article: situated near the bottom of New Zealand's South Island, Dunedin in June is cold and wet and feels like the edge of the world. Look out across the enormity of the Southern Ocean and its next stop, Antarctica. I want to go there.
Yeah, well, like, I mean, I'm reading that going, like, because the one...
may never see you again. You'll end up in Dunedin and you'll get lost in the mist.
The one thing that, like, the kind of, a lot of my fellow journalists who are going, who've been there kind of several times for Lions tours and things like that, are saying, like, it's very hard to get your head around going into the depths of winter from now, albeit the weather isn't great here in Dublin at the moment either, but it's very hard to get your head around it. But when I was watching the Super Rugby final yesterday, I was going, God, I can see, like, I know what they mean. Like, it was absolutely bucketing down. It's cold, it's wet, it gets dark early. But I mean, yeah, I just can't wait to see what it entails.
I can't wait. I'm going on my walking balls bridge this evening and somebody winding down the car window and go, Duggan, you're great.
Yeah.
At what? I don't know. Kieran Dyer, just for anybody watching on the digital and social channels, just the I'm going to bring it over here. Yeah, I've got it over here. Yeah, just the article in the Daily Mail by Oliver Holt. My greatest hope is that whoever's liver I get, I do that person proud. I would be precious to get a second chance at life. England striker, our former star rather, Kieran Dyer, is staying positive in his battle with serious disease. So Dyer's 43 years old. 20 years ago this week he's playing for England in a World Cup quarter-final against Brazil, but last year he was told a rare condition he suffers from, primary sclerosing cholangitis, a disease that scars the bile ducts and gradually causes serious liver damage, had worsened. He needed a transplant. He's been waiting listed for a donor liver for 6 months. If I don't have the transplant, he says, my liver could pack in. There'd be nothing they could do for me. And also in the article, which is absolutely essential read, he's facing his biggest battle now. I was really scared when I got told I needed a liver transplant, he says. I thought that was it. But then when the third surgeon and the transplant team came around, they got so many people in the team, coordinators, the anaesthetists, physios, psychiatrists. You see people who've overcome the operation. It's kind of routine for the hospital now. They do so many of them. When I was first diagnosed, my eyes were yellow, my skin was jaundiced. The PSC is the scarring of the tubes in your liver, the tubes that produce bile. If the scarring gets so thick, the bile can't go through the tubes into your liver and goes into your bloodstream. That's why I was going yellow, where the bile was going into my bloodstream. And to finish, this is part 2 of my life. I want to see what I can achieve. The hard thing is I'm dependent on someone else's misfortune to get it, but if I'm given another opportunity at life, I'm going to embrace it. We wish the best for Kieran Dyer of Ipswich, Newcastle, West Ham, QPR, Middlesbrough and England. He was a huge talent, 33 England caps, dogged by injuries throughout his career, Kieran Dyer, but just shows, I suppose, Arthur, the fragility of life, and you wish him well.
Yeah, that's devastating. That's extremely sad. Yeah, he's someone I've not really thought about in a while, I suppose, just when he kind of ventured off. But when I was properly coming into football first, maybe 10, I suppose, it's 20, sorry, not 20, obviously, but early 2000s. And he was just part of that Newcastle team, like with Shearer and Bellamy and all these guys, Shea Given obviously coming through. It was just such an exciting under Bobby Robson.
Yeah.
It's, yeah, I hope that works out all right for him, to be honest.
It reminds me of Jonah Lomu, actually. And I was lucky enough to meet him and chat to him before he unfortunately passed away. He had real bad kind of struggles with his liver as well, and like you said, John, it just shows the fragility of life. But also, like, I mean, you have a tendency to hold these guys up, and no one more than Jonah Lomu, like this indestructible force, like on a rugby pitch, an absolute true trailblazer. And yeah, like, I mean, you don't kind of get, I suppose, starstruck or whatever much well, I certainly don't nowadays in terms of people who you're chatting to and meeting in the game. But I have to say, meeting Jonah Lomu that time a good few years ago was a real cherished memory I have.
Yeah, well said. And other soccer riding, Arthur, we have obviously the kind of, you're always going to get the post-mortems on the Nations League and the Republic of Ireland and the constant chatter.
Well, there's a very interesting piece you pointed out to me first in the Sunday Times, Paul Rowan, talking about Troy Parrott. And it's kind of, I suppose, it's not saying, I suppose, what is going to happen one way or another. There is a degree of uncertainty about, I suppose, what happens for him next. And it's you kind of also at the same time, there's that fear that despite being so, at one point, and again, we got to be realistic, he's extremely young, but it's funny, like when you see the likes now of Obafemi, kind of, it really clicked for him at Swansea towards the end of last season, and he'll kick on, you presume, again. And you're just kind of, the next decision almost kind of feels for Parrott, who kind of had a bit of a mixed bag over the last 4 Nations League games. It kind of feels like it's going to be essential for him, and you really want him to land. Kind of the loan moves have been okay for him. He's probably not going to make the breakthrough at Spurs.
No, he's not.
You know, and it's just that's the reality of it. He probably won't get another. He obviously will not get into another Premier League
yet.
Thing. No, not yet. That's what I mean. So that kind of next move. But like, I suppose people always kind of laud the competitiveness of the Championship, but it's like, there's also that unpredictability. Like, you could latch yourself onto a thing that's going brilliantly and it completely fires you up again the line, or you go somewhere that for all intents and purposes seems sound, well run.
Derby County.
Exactly, and all of a sudden, God almighty, you could be getting relegated. Like, so it's extremely important for him. But it's interesting. I'm fascinated by those kind of, there's for college, I don't, the quote, I think that he who matures early lives in anticipation. And I think for someone like Parrott, who was so bright, like everybody talked about him and the way they talked about him. I remember Stephen Elliott, on one Saturday with you, talking about seeing him play in Clontarf, somewhere even that far back. And just this guy who is just supremely talented. We've seen glimpses of that talent, but you are kind of now, it's like, right, well, MK Dons, Millwall kind of didn't, it was okay. MK Dons was kind of okay when you went there. And it's that next kind of decision that you want to see him kind of fulfill his potential. Even some degree of it, like, because it is there. Like, he's obviously got the way people talk about him. Like, you just kind of want to see it happen, though. But it's so fragile.
Well, the one line out of it I took out of the article: going on loan is playing men's football.
Yeah.
And realising what you have to do throughout a game. I think I've matured a lot over the 3 loans I've had. I'm just happy it's starting to click. But as you're right, it's the cusp now. It's make or break to a degree.
It is.
With Troy Parrott. We had this at Robbie Brady. Robbie Brady was the man at Man United. He was going to be the star at Man United. And he's had a very successful career. We all remember Lille. But, he had a very successful career, Burnley and Hull and all these teams. But we're talking about a global league that is now much more competitive than it was 30 years ago in terms of Irish players and other players like from Wales and Scotland breaking into this league. And that's what we're seeing with Nathan Collins now, that people are going, wow, well, Nathan Collins could be working at Vincent Kompany, Josh Cullen could end up at Burnley, all these things could happen. But then Burnley could have ownership issues. It might be right for Nathan Collins to get out of Burnley, and that's where agents, that's where family comes in, that's where living your life the right way comes in, that's where advice comes in, that's where dedication comes in. And these are the things that are really important now for Troy Parrott, because we're seeing, I think, with his game, a bit more, as you say, maturity, a bit more aggression at times, a bit more intelligence. Because Troy Parrott, for me, for anything I know about him, he's always been a player that has instinct to be in the right place at the right time and score goals. You wouldn't say that he's an amazing athlete or he's the quickest player you've ever seen. A bit like Harry Kane has the ability to be in the right spot. We saw that, for example, even like in the, I would say, call them minor games against Lithuania, against Andorra last year, against Scotland, when he was able to make the run. Never played a Dumabemi before. And then Obafemi and scores the goals. So, yeah.
You have to be kind of surrounded by, being advised is so crucial, because I'm sure they don't read the papers or listen to what we're saying, but we do tend to have a tendency to overhype players, and I think you're starting to see that now with Nathan Collins as well. Like, the goal was unbelievable. He's clearly very talented, and I'm guilty of it as well. I think back to someone like Jordan Larmour in rugby, who, when he first broke on the scene, we were going, wow, like, he was nominated for Young World Player of the Year, and you were going, wow, the sky is the limit for this guy. And he's had injury problems, but he hasn't kicked on to the same level. It would be interesting to see in New Zealand. And I think sometimes you need to take a step back. I've heard people saying, oh, Nathan Collins, comparing him to Paul McGrath and things like that. It's kind of let's just temper it. He played unbelievably well the other night, and he's clearly super talented, massive potential, but sometimes you kind of have to rein it in, and I think we do tend to go a little bit overboard, and I think that
we're desperate though. We're desperate. We're desperate for it.
And that's what happened with Troy Parrott as well. He's the answer to Robbie Keane. He's going to be the one to score the goals rather than just letting him kind of develop, and I think we're starting to see that now with Stephen Kenny. And you look through this, I actually was only thinking about this yesterday. You look through the spine of that Ireland team at the moment now. You've got Bazunu and Keller obviously in goals, you've got Collins at the back, you've got Knight and Malumbi, and then you've got Parrott, Ogbene up front, and Obafemi as well. It's and Tommy Conlon is writing about this, the headline light at the end of the tunnel, and there is a sense of that. I was going to, I didn't get to any of the games in this window because I wasn't around, but in the previous one, I don't get to go to Aviva as a supporter that often anymore, because I'm generally in the press box working there at rugby games. But I just felt like the amount of goodwill there was behind starting, particularly for the Portugal game, it felt like such a massive occasion. It actually felt like being at a Premier League game is the best kind of way I can describe it. Even the walk up Lansdowne Road that night, I'll never forget it. It was unbelievable. So I think people are, I don't know, I understand the critics, you should be beating teams like Armenia, but then you have to factor in the heat and all that. But sometimes I just think like people's expectations of Ireland as a nation are just wildly out of sync with what they should be. There are young players coming through. There's going to be bumps in this road. This is not like going to be an overnight success, but like I said, when you look through the spine of the team, you can see what Kenny is trying to create, and you can see him allowing these lads to flourish. Because like you mentioned Troy Parrott playing on instinct, JD, and that goal was just purely instinct, and like down to Obafemi's pass and down to the header. You want to see more of that, and I think Kenny is allowing these guys to flourish. And like the last two games were obviously positive, the last two results, but that doesn't mean they're the finished article by any means at all. Like there could easily be another defeat that will set them back again, and it's about how you kind of respond to that. But I just don't think Ireland are suddenly going to turn into a team where you can expect them to win all 4 games in the Nations League window that they just had.
Philip Quinn's article in the Irish Daily Mail on Sunday: under Kenny, Ireland have not found winning easy. 6 wins in 26 games is a modest 23% strike rate, which falls to less than 16% for the 3 wins in 19 competitive games. He also points to a conversation Liam Brady had on the Stand podcast with Eamon Dunphy. So this is the quote: "You're kind of scratching your head about Shane Duffy, wondering why is he doing it? Is Stephen Kenny telling him to do it? We've seen the Irish team do that far too much, in my opinion. And you have to look at the results and say they're not good enough." This is Liam Brady. So not everybody has the necessarily has the view that everything is rosy in the garden when it comes to the Republic of Ireland team, and that's obviously good. It's healthy debate that there will be many people with many different views on the progression of the team.
The alternative with always those types of things, and to be fair, I think, I don't know if we're in a bubble or whatever, I think generally the people are more positive than negative, maybe. Certainly people covering it. But what's the alternative? Like what and people kind of rate, what are we harking back to that? You kind of have
hoofball to get scrappy 1-0 wins, and like I said, like this is a long-term plan, and I was not surprised, but I actually thought it was like enlightening going to the games in the previous window. And I could go back to the particular Portugal game, like walking out of the stadium, that like there was young kids, like everyone singing Stephen Kenny's name and stuff. Now granted there's been games since that, but I agree, I think most of the fans going to the game are very much behind us. And like to go back to Tommy Connolly, he's kind of writing about, you know, an identity crisis, and I understand the point he's making, but I actually think there is an identity to this Ireland team, or certainly you can see what they're trying to make their identity. The problem is we're not used to, in Irish football, having the identity that Stephen wants to create. So like you said, JD, it's a hoofball, but I don't think it's a crisis as such. I actually think it's encouraging to see the identity that they want to become.
I think that people out there are always more intelligent than you give them credit for, and I think people understand that structurally Irish football has had a huge amount of challenges, a lot of them self-inflicted, and the game, you know, FAI are saddled with a huge amount of debt, and obviously they're trying to work on that at the moment, but they realise that there are bigger structural issues rather than the who's on the sideline managing the team. Like how many players are playing Premier League football on a regular basis. Nathan Collins last season and Seamus Coleman
at a time. You're spot on. Like it's a completely different landscape. It's literally one that hasn't really no Irish football managers really faced.
No.
Like it just considering, as you're saying, like because of the change in dynamic of how football is in England, that the fact that again it's like and that's not to say that players aren't as good, but just the competition is so fierce.
Brexit gives us an opportunity to develop an indigenous industry until the age of 18, get people to get a proper education, and then if they want to go, they want to go. But you're also then seeing Kevin Zeffis, the James Abankwahs moving to Italy. But I really do think that soccer, for me, Gaelic games to me is an industry in the country, and like you just met the quality of facilities around the country in hurling and football, local clubs. I don't know about rugby, Cian, to the same extent, but I do think that soccer does need government support, with my view, to get these new generational talents in. But I think sometimes we're just so desperate we're so desperate for Nathan Collins to make it. We're desperate for Troy Parrott to make it. We're desperate for Obafemi, he did something, you know. What's he going to do next? You know, there is because we know what these days are like. We know what these tournaments can be. We know that, you know, any of us lucky enough to remember Italia 90 or USA 94 or even Korea and Japan, despite the circus it became. When we got to the football part of it, we know what these things are like, and you're seeing, like, I know this year aside, you're seeing even this week they're naming the cities for the World Cup in USA and Canada and Mexico in 2026. We'd all love to be there. It's part of our identity. You know, go back to what you're saying earlier in the conversation, Arthur. Like being a Newcastle fan is somebody's life. It's their identity. It's their social currency. It's what they talk to people about all day. They put on the shirt on a Saturday afternoon. They might not have had the best of weeks. So to be asking them after the game, well, yeah, you won 3-0 against Man United, but what about the sports washing?
Yeah.
They don't want to hear that. They just want to have their drink. I think a lot of that is about, that's what we're all trying to, that's like, you even tell through the speakers of Nathan Murphy and Stewie Burmer doing the commentary last Saturday, wow, you can feel the atmosphere here for a Nations League game against Scotland. So people want a bit more of that, I think. 53106, lads, what's Ireland's scoring average under Kenny compared to the same amount of games prior to his appointment? No, well, we can check it out, no. And exactly, lads, calm down and let players develop. Some will make it, some won't. Just don't blow them up to ridiculous status before they got there. They're good players, obviously, they're worth an Irish jersey, but they're not yet the golden child or the best player in the world. Talk about them, but don't blow it out of proportion, says Beardy Dave on 53106. Nice piece as well by Paul Rowan on Noel Campbell, who passed away this week. Colourful Campbell was an Irish pioneer. Remember, he was the first Irish player to play in the Bundesliga in the 70s, played for Fortuna Cologne and played for the Republic of Ireland as well. A good few times in the 70s. Here's, I quote here, Campbell, a homebird, said he was there for the money, really. He was also typically honest when later in Michael Walker's book Green Shoots, he described his bizarre relationship with the Cologne chairman and millionaire owner of the club, Jean Loring. He loved the bones off me, but we'd get into terrible arguments about my drinking and smoking and not looking after myself. A fluent German speaker, Noel returned to Cologne many times after he retired for reunions, where he's at the top table at all the social gatherings. No doubt his old friends in Germany will be raising a glass to his most colourful of characters as he takes his place again at the top table. Lovely piece, and may Noel rest in peace. Arthur and Cian, thanks so much. Great stuff.
Yeah. Cheers, Eddie.
Enjoy New Zealand.
Thank you. Be chatting to you, no doubt.
Yeah, we will, and have a great time. And obviously, hopefully, Ireland will do well and win a game, or maybe win a test, or maybe win the series. So that's been the Sunday Paper Review. Arthur James O'Dea on OTB Sports and Cian Tracy in the Irish Independent. We're back after the break, checking in with Michael Quinn living at Croke Park because Cavan are into the Charlton Cup final. Back after this.
The Sunday Papers
on Off the Ball.